I'm Maria. What is your name?
I'm Mike.
Mike.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Who's that guy?
Yes. Who?
Two.
Wait, don't tell me. This one.
That's what it is.
No, it's not.
Try it doing the time.
Channel 1?
Yeah. Which Wi-Fi do I want to
Yeah, look at that.
That's it.
How'd you do that?
Yes, Wi-Fi.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it'll kind of make you register, but here's those instructions and they should walk you through it. Let me know because I made those instructions. So if you find something hard, just tell me.
So we live stream this.
We're recording and we are unmuted. We're good to go.
Okay, and we have Commissioner Ebler on Zoom.
Muted.
I'm muted.
Okay, we're good.
Okay, we'll call to order the working session for the March 8th, 2023 Cottonwood Heights Planning Commission. And we will review the business session agenda items, which I think there's only one tonight, project CUP 23002. The public hearing and possible action on a request from Kathy Sanchez to operate a home daycare. And do we have any other items that we're going to discuss during the work session?
I don't think so. Yeah, we just have for the business session approval of a couple of January minutes that have been kicking around. But I don't think we have anything else to chat through from staff on the work session. So.
All right, should we jump into the item?
Sure. I do have one item of business from the minutes from our last meeting. It
Oh, okay.
was just slightly incorrect about my background. I'm not currently employed at the University of Utah. I don't know if I need to correct that.
Yeah, so when you guys go to make a motion on the minutes, if that does take place in the
Yeah.
business meeting, we'll just have acknowledged that you'd like that edit to be made. We have that on the record from this
Okay.
meeting. We'll coordinate with Maria. We should introduce Maria actually.
And everybody else.
To make sure that that's reflected. So thank you for bringing that up.
Sure.
Maria is our new deputy city recorder. So if you want to introduce yourself, say a little bit.
Yeah, hi, my name is
Hi,
Maria Devereaux. Hi, good to meet you. I'm the HR manager, deputy city recorder here, and had a lot of government experience, and I'm lucky to land up here. So anyway, I'm happy to hear things.
Thanks, Maria.
Would you like us to introduce ourselves?
Would you please?
All right, since I said it. Lucy Anderson.
Jesse Allen.
Jesse is our chair
Mhm.
for minutes purposes.
Thank you, yes.
Sean Steinman.
Mike Shelton.
And I'm Mike Smith.
All right.
And then we've got Commissioner Ebler, Jonathan Ebler on Zoom.
Hey, Jonathan Epler.
And then we may be getting one more, Jessica Chapel. I'm not sure if she's planning to attend or not. So if she pops in, that's who it is.
I guess the other thing we could talk about is transition of chair,
Sure, yeah.
which
Yeah, let's touch on that after
Okay.
the item and we can
Okay.
just, go through what that would look like.
Okay.
Great.
Is everybody ready for me to begin? Okay, just share my screen. And I attended a previous planning commission meeting, but I can't quite remember if everybody was there. So my name's Ian. I'm a new city planner here at Cottonwood Heights. I think I've met all of you, but if I haven't, that's who I am. So this is the first time I brought an application to, so I'm excited to bring this one to you. So today we have a conditional use application for a daycare.
Try going down with your pursuit. It's weird.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that side to side doesn't work. Yeah.
So this is a conditional use application for a home daycare of up to 12 children. It would technically be a home occupation, so the applicant resides in the residence, and this would be kind of a secondary use of the property. The primary use would still be residential. So there's no rezoning as part of this application. That's not really what a conditional use permit is. It's just to grant them approval to use the property as home daycare for children. The applicant's Kathy Sanchez, I believe she's in the audience, and then the property owner's in the audience as well. So if you have questions for them later on, they should be here to answer those. So I just prepared a couple context maps for you guys. This is the same map that was on the previous slide on the left.
It's a little easier to see on the TV behind
Yeah,
us.
the color kind of gets washed out on the projector. But yeah, the map on the left just shows the immediate vicinity, the cross streets. You can kind of see that 215 is to the north of the house. And then on the wide view, I would have used our city maps, but I was having trouble loading those. So I just pulled this from Google Maps. That big arrow just points to the exact spot where the house is. And that's just kind of a general overview of the area. A wider view so you can kind of get the context within the city. So it's north of Fort Union and east of 13th East and just south of 215. The street that it's on, it kind of runs, kind of curves around, but it goes from 13th East, kind of curves up and then goes eventually back down to Fort Union. So that's kind of where that where that street distributes to. And then this is a Google Street View picture of the property. I've driven by it a couple of times. The only update is that the fence on the side yard is vinyl and 6 feet tall, and there's also a fence behind the house that kind of closes in the backyard. But the property is located at 1542 East, 6670 South. The property owner is Carlos Sanchez. I believe he's the son of the applicant. The zone that it sits in is R18, single family, what most of the city is zoned as. And the property is just under 1/5 of an acre, large. So this is just kind of a summary of the proposal that the applicant provided to us. They're just proposing a home daycare for children, which is a conditional use in our city code. They're proposing for it to be open from 7:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., which is within the allowed hours. The owner and then the sole supplemental employee of the business also resides at the address. They intend to enroll up to 12 children after approval. That's the maximum that they're allowed. And they plan to utilize the east side and the immediate rear yard as a play area. And they're going to utilize the driveway as a parking / drop-off area. There's a site plan on the next slide that you can see. The applicant drew this up and sent it to us. Where you see parking stalls 1 and 2, just adjacent to the home, that's actually a garage, I believe. So those would be considered the required stalls for the residents, the 2 stalls that are required. And then parking stalls 3 and 4 would be used by, I guess, a parent or a guardian to pick up and drop off their children. They're required to have 1 stall for that purpose, but the driveway is wide enough that it can accommodate others at a time. And they don't need an additional space for an employee since all the employees of the business reside at the dwelling. We did receive 4 public comments by noon on Tuesday. I believe that those were distributed to you for the meeting. So I hope that you've had a chance to read over those. All 4 comments were in opposition, and some of the common concerns that they stated were increased traffic in a residential area. That's a common concern by all 4 comments. There was kind of a fear of a new precedent in the area, a fear that this would allow more commercial businesses to come in and increase traffic and cause a quiet neighborhood to become busy. And then also noise levels by the children, I assume when they're outside playing. We recommend approval of this application because it's met the conditions as outlined in code. And I'll just go through the conditions of approval really quickly. So the applicant is required to obtain and maintain a business license with the city. I believe they have to renew that once a year. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
They also must, the applicant as a business owner needs to let the customers know that they have to use the provided off-street parking. So that would be the driveway when they're picking up and dropping off their children. They can't rely on street parking, especially in the winter with the plows and everything. They need to have that driveway clear for people to use that when they're picking up and dropping off their children. Approval of the home occupation is subject to review upon complaint. Any signage that they want to do must comply with city code. I believe it's stated in the city code that pertains to home daycares that the only signage they're allowed is a nameplate sign. So that would just be like a small, something on the door to signify this is the daycare, you're in the right place. No more than 1 non-resident employee is permitted at the business. Again, they're just proposing the extra employee who resides at the residence currently. If they do want to hire an extra employee, they are allowed that, but they need to make sure that that parking stall for the employee is still there. And they're only allowed that 1 extra outside employee. Also, there may be a maximum of 12 kids on the premises at any time, including the caregiver's own children under the age of 6 and not yet fully in school. So these are the conditions that the applicant has met, and that's why we're recommending approval. Here are just a couple model motions for when we go into the business session. If you approve, just make sure to list any other findings that weren't detailed in the presentation or other conditions. And then if you move to deny, just list any findings you have for denial as well. I think that's all I have. So I'll turn the time back over. It looks like Commissioner Edler has his hand raised. But
Go ahead, Commissioner Edler.
Does anyone else want to go first?
Can I take a minute just as staff to clarify just a few really what the commission's role is in these. Because I've read some of the comments, the public comments, and there could be some confusion there. And I will first say that every time we've had a home daycare come forward, it generates a lot of public interest in neighborhoods. And we hear similar comments and they're valid concerns. So I just want to take a few minutes and go through kind of the role, how these are classified in the city ordinance, what the commission can and cannot do in these cases. This is a conditional use application, and from the state code on down to the local level, we are told how to process conditional uses, and that is a conditional use is an allowed use. It's entitled to approval. So we start from a point of, hey, this is allowed here. This should be approved. Where the commission or the land use authority has some discretion is in analyzing the potential impacts that a conditional use may have on the surrounding area. If it finds that there are any negative impacts, then the land use authority can impose conditions that are reasonable. They have to be reasonable and tied to the impact that they're anticipated to cause. The applicant is then generally given some time to comply with that, with any recommended conditions. You can, as a commission, impose a condition and approve and vote on it, or ask for additional information that you think would maybe answer some of the legitimate concerns you hear or the legitimate impacts that you think the use might have, and ask them to come back to a further meeting. But a few things just to clarify from the public comments, it is not a rezone, as Ian said. Home businesses and home occupations and home daycares and home businesses that have clients, they're allowed. They're an allowed use in every single residential single family zone in the city. So the concern over precedent is not really a valid concern here, because it's already allowed in code to have a home business at any single residential property in the city. And that can include home daycares, which go through the extra step of coming through this public hearing process. So as you go through and consider this tonight and hear public comments that we're anticipating, if the commission finds that there are some potential impacts and needs more information from the applicant, you certainly can do that and continue the meeting to a future date and ask for that information. You can add additional conditions to your motion or to your final vote that you think might help mitigate some of the concerns. But outright denial just based on, for lack of a better term, public clamor, it is not allowed for conditional uses. So it's got to all be very analytical, tied to the impacts that are perceived. And then before jumping to any vote of denial, it would have to be, hey, are there any conditions that can be imposed that would mitigate the concerns? Okay, back to you.
Commissioner Ebeling?
Thank you, Chair Allen. Just probably a quick question to Mike, just based on that same line of reasoning. In the last 5 years, has the commission or the city ever denied conditional use for a daycare?
Not that I'm aware of.
There was one that's been denied in about 15 or so in the city's history that have been approved. The
Okay.
one that was denied is because the commission asked for additional information and it was never provided. It was
Okay.
never responded at all. So it kept coming back to meetings over and over again. And I think the commission just eventually said they haven't complied by addressing these reasonable concerns, so they denied it.
I think it more or less expired, so it was denial like almost through expiration.
Okay, so there'd be a reasonable argument for arbitrary and capriciousness for any denial based upon much of our prior voting history.
Yeah, I mean, I won't venture into the legality of it, but,
Right.
there is a long track record of these being approved. I recall one, probably 7 or so years ago that was approved. And it was appealed by the neighborhood, and the appeal was denied by the Board of Adjustment. The approval was upheld by the city.
Okay, next question is more logistics question, and it kind of ties into some of the original planning report. I understand, the limit of the 12 and the 1 employee. Has the applicant given proposed target audience in terms of who they're servicing, in terms of the age of the people or the age of the kids that they're gonna have there?
I haven't heard any more detailed information on like the
Did they say under
demographics.
6? I mean,
That, I think that requirement,
That's the ordinance.
Their
The
children.
ordinance just specifies that the caregiver's own children who are under the age of 6 would be counted toward the 12.
Oh,
I think if you want that information, definitely have the applicant come up maybe in the business meeting and clarify that point. But you know, we're glad to have them here to give more information on their business if you need it.
Yeah, so I mean, the reason I bring it up is the state of Utah has certain ratios for the child to caregiver, and it's age specific. So it's birth to 12 is 1 to 4, 13 to 24 months is 1 to 4, 2 years is 1 to 7, and then 3 years is 1 to 12, and then after that it's like 1 to 15, 1 to 20. And
Yeah.
so the condition about the one employee, all of a sudden it becomes much more important in terms of what are the ages of the kids that are being served.
Yeah, and I will clarify that it's supposed to be kind of one additional employee beyond the business owner. So I think that you do have the 2, and I do know the applicant is aware of those ratios based on pre-application meetings we had. But certainly if you see it as appropriate to just mention a condition that references the state regulations on childcare ratios. It's a valid concern in my opinion.
I mean, so it's as long as they have the additional 1, it's only relevant if they're serving kids under 2 or under 24 months or under 2 years, because then the ratio changes to 1 to 4, so you need 3. So that was kind of the thing that stood out in my mind, but just wanted to kind of throw it out there. That's pretty much all I had.
all right, any other questions?
Yeah, I had the same concern about ratio of ages. And then the other concern I have is with the number of cars that, because it's talking about not to use the street, but it's a very short driveway. I mean, you can't, you can get a couple of cars in there. What happens to the other 8 cars that are wanting to drop off at the same time? I mean, there's no guarantee. I mean, it could happen. And how is that alleviated?
Yeah, I would say, again, we can ask for more information from the applicant if they want to speak to that. I will just mention since we're talking about kind of past similar projects, some past daycares have done a staggering system where they've said the pickup and drop off will be staggered at certain times so that there aren't all the parents at once coming. So that could be something the commission considers potentially as a condition, is some staggering to mitigate a traffic influx. It's tricky because with home businesses, it just specifies the 1 additional spot. Our code doesn't give us a great mechanism to say, you know, in these instances, it's more like you would get with a commercial business.
Sure.
So I think that's why it's great that it comes to planning commission so that you guys can consider those factors and maybe think about some conditions that could work. But it's also possible the applicant has more information on it.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that's my concern is, I mean, I fully support any additional childcare that is done well, because it's sorely lacking, but we have to consider, I mean.
Yeah,
everything.
definitely a reasonable concern. And even going back to the last one, that was a very organized application. They had a whole pick up and drop off plan and how they would communicate that to parents and, you know, pull up, don't get out of your car. We're going to shuffle the kids in, a whole safety drop off pickup plan.
Yeah, and that was the other thing I was going to bring up. We don't want little kids running out of the car
and that to me is a legitimate impact that you could mitigate through a condition, or at least by asking for more information. However you see fit.
Can we just require that as a precondition to approval of a codified or thought out plan that's approved by the city?
You could, yeah. You could ask to see it back at a future meeting, or you could recommend a condition that they provide that it's reviewed by staff. If there are certain things you want to see there that you think would alleviate the concern, you can stipulate that in your motion. So you have some flexibility in how to approach that if that's where you want to go.
we could also look at doing a code update. I don't know if this gets at what you were thinking too, that just requires that for these applications. But that to put it into the code to require is sort of a horse of a different color. That would be a code update.
I mean, for my read of most of the public comments, it was a lot of traffic concerns and whatever else. So if this is just a code requirement and something that is just part and parcel of the application, it seems like it would go a long way to mitigating some of this.
Yeah, we are actually looking to do kind of a broader code cleanup, and it'll be coming back to you guys in the spring. So maybe that's something we put on that list Always
Okay.
appreciate the opportunity to clarify our code, but for the code we have today, the option there would be doing a condition for this project specifically.
Yeah, and I agree with my fellow commissioners' comments. I mean, childcare is sorely needed in the city, so as long as it's done well.
Quick question, in a distant memory, there was an issue about counting stacked parking
Tandem
spots.
parking, yes.
Does that not apply here? I was related to a
Yeah,
different topic, I
right.
know, but.
Yeah.
We looked at this.
Very topical to bring up. I'm glad you did.
So parking for the residential use itself, there's no regulations. Single family parking is basically exempted from the tandem parking requirements. So we have discounted, basically, those two stalls are in the garage. They're there for the residential use, but they don't come into play for the tandem parking calculation. You just have to have, in this case, one more accessible parking stall for the use of the daycare. They have two.
Ian's pulled up the code, which is really helpful. So it basically says, like, with the exception of single family uses, tandem parking isn't allowed. But for the single family residents, they could use that garage parking that would be a tandem stall, as long as the business stalls would be accessible in the driveway to back right out.
But couldn't you say, and I'm not looking to say this necessarily, but that because those additional spaces are tandem to the residential spaces, that, and they're not residential spaces, they're daycare spaces, that this language applies?
My interpretation of it is that because the business spaces would not be blocked by any other cars, they would not be the tandem ones. The ones inside the garage would be the tandem stalls, and those are the single family. So the two that would be used for the business would be openly accessible. But that is my interpretation of it. I could be wrong.
So is there only 2 business parking stalls currently?
Yeah, and the code only requires one.
Yeah.
And they're tandem to the residential parking.
They're behind.
Or the residential parking, so
Tandem.
tandem to them, I guess you could say to them.
So in the conditions of approval, line item 2, customers must provide off-street parking. So I think if we just created an amendment to that to then allow for some type of a codified situation as far as kind of either staggered, because I'd imagine if there's 12 kids, there's probably 12 separate cars.
Sure, so doing a
Max.
condition that addresses pickup times being staggered.
Correct.
I think that that's an appropriate response to an impact. And I do want to mention again, when you bring the applicant up, if you choose to do that in a business meeting, they may have information on an intention to already do that. It's not something we received as part of the application, but that's something that has been done in past applications. So I think that's feasible.
All right, so this is maybe more for my education because we have time and I'm gonna burn it, but can you prohibit, the conditions seem to do this, can you prohibit the use of the street parking? I don't think you can count it,
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you can't prohibit it either.
On-street parking is allowed in the city under certain, you can't block driveways, you can't block intersections, you can't be parked there during a snow event.
So,
Which is why I think in the code, it says for the actual daycare, you have to have at least one off-street stall. Now, yeah, absolutely, you could go park on the curb if it's not a restricted parking area and if it meets code, public parking is allowed.
the condition.
but could you drop off there, I guess is the
The
question.
condition that was included was more getting at, this may be allowed by city code, but to reduce an impact, we're gonna say it needs to be off-street parking only. I'm not sure if it, if somebody said, well, I legally have a right to park here because it's a public street. But typically with these business applications, we do just say, you can't park on the street. Your customers need to be made aware that they need to use your own private parking because that could be an impact to the neighborhood if that's occurring. So again, that's my read of it.
Yeah, good question. I think I keep going back to the last ones of these we did. One of the applications that was approved had a plan where the parents didn't get out of the car, but they did pull up on the street and then the staff came and got them out of the car. And that was approved. So if there's a situation like that, that's workable, I think that's on the table. It may require some modification of the recommended condition here.
Yeah, you could definitely reword that condition that we've recommended if you felt like it was appropriate to use it just with tightly regulated windows of drop off and pickup. Feel free to reword those conditions as needed.
All right, last one for me. There was some inference in the comments that that applicant didn't live in the home. And maybe I misread it. Did anyone else see that inference in the comments?
Yes.
The applicant must live in the home.
To run a home business, yeah, you have to reside there.
You cannot do this.
Correct.
as-
We requested proof of residency and got some documentation that, you know, it's not a perfect science by any means, but that shows the applicant's name and that as the address. It's like an insurance document or something like that. To staff, that's reasonably enough.
Yeah.
Now, if there were more evidence presented upon complaint that the applicant doesn't in fact live there, then that would be that condition that, you know, subject to complaint, we can revisit this. Because that would violate the home business requirement.
Yeah, at that point, it's just a business.
Yeah.
It's not a home
It's
business.
not its primary, its primary use is not residential,
Yeah.
Which seemed to be the fear.
the base case.
We've had other questions too of past people who are like, I'm interested in renting out a room in the house to somebody and then using it as my business, but I won't live there. It's like, nope, the person who's running the business has to live there because it's your home business. You're on site to deal with any issues. So yeah, that is.
But it it's seems reasonable in this case that the person who resides there does not have to own the home.
Correct. We also have an owner's consent form from the property owner that consents to the application. So yeah, those are good questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just have a question, Mr. Johnson, maybe you could help me with this, just for my education, maybe it doesn't pertain to this, but
Yeah.
are there examples of home businesses that have been denied?
Good question. We've had
Hmm.
some that had like tightly regulated products like firearms that I know had to go through a very thorough vetting.
Yeah, probably not from a zoning standpoint, outside of. An application was made and the city requested information and it was never provided and it just kind of lapsed.
Or sometimes people will say, I want to apply for this and I'm going to be like manufacturing a product and we'll say, oh, you can't do that. So there are some
There are
guardrails.
restrictions on what the home occupation.
Let's-
You couldn't do like retail,
Yeah,
you couldn't open a,
There's certain
Convenience
types
store.
of, certain types of.
Yeah.
business.
typically how it works is someone will call and say, hey, I'm interested in doing this. Is it allowed? And we'll say, oh, no, that's not allowed, or yes, but you have to go through this process. So we don't get a lot that go through that whole screening process and then still make an application after they're told, no, that wouldn't be allowed there, that end up in
There
a denial.
haven't been any denials that I can recall since I've been here. Usually if people make the application, they've kind of vetted through those initial steps of like, is it feasible? Is it?
Just for the commission's benefit, few different things here. There are only certain home occupations that rise to the level of needing a public hearing. Home occupations with clients, not a daycare, but anything where you have a client coming in, goes through something called an administrative hearing, which the commission delegated as to me as the hearing officer for those. So those are just like
Get piano
home
lessons.
counseling or piano lessons, things like that, go through that process. These daycares and preschools with up to 12 children require full planning commission process. Daycares for up to 6 children are fully permitted. They're just allowed by right. So they don't go through any hearing process. They're just approved if they meet the conditions. And then home businesses without clients, they're allowed. We ask for a business license, but we don't charge any fees. And there are probably more of those licenses issued in the city than there are commercial business
Yeah.
licenses. Just to give you an idea of how many home businesses there are. throughout the
Those would
city.
be just like a home office. Sometimes when we say home business, that's home businesses without clients, people are like, must not be a successful business. if there's no
Yeah,
clients.
just home office.
So it's like
Yeah.
using, I'm a realtor and I work out of my home. That would be a home business without clients.
So I guess the point is, home businesses come in a lot of different flavors, and there are hundreds of them in the city.
Yeah.
Including daycares just like this with, 12 children.
Any other questions from the commission? You guys have had really great discussion. I think.
Do you have any of those examples of the staggered scheduling?
I could in between meetings pull up maybe what was done from the last one I recall. The other option you could do is have a condition that says a staggered schedule needs to be submitted and approved by staff. We'd be happy to do that.
Because currently it says customers must use provided off-street parking, so if
Right.
anybody parks on the street, that would create an issue.
Yeah, if you're wanting to look at doing kind of a staggering condition, I would just add that in as a separate line item to the conditions there.
I think it's implied, but not specifically
We always
stated,
appreciate the
you know, so I would agree that.
Yeah, I can look in between meetings at how it was handled with the last one. But you could keep it fairly broad and allow them to submit something that we look at or that comes back to another meeting if you felt like that was needed.
We could consider codifying that in the future as well.
Yeah, I think these meetings are always really informative for us where we're like, well, there's just these limitations of our code where like, that'd be great to just have that in there. So I think you'll be getting a very sizable packet with code red lines in April.
And could it be as specific as not allowing drop off or pickup of more than 2 vehicles at a time or every 15 minutes or?
I think so. Just if you go that direction, make sure to tie it to a potential impact that condition is helping offset.
It is one of the conditions that I put on the presentation was customers must be made aware of these parking restrictions. So that's something you could kind of tie into that. They must be made aware of like a schedule or yeah, however you'd like to look at that.
There's something funky on the screen.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
we're just gonna join another meeting.
Yeah.
We don't have enough staff, so it's interesting.
It's not on there.
We are so grateful that Alex is here because I don't know if you guys remember the one time we didn't have IT here and the meeting just evolved into absolute chaos where like Andy was sweating and I was like near tears. I was like, it's not working. And we're so glad you're here, Alex.
We're always glad in general, but.
Okay, are there any other questions or discussion on this item?
Thank you. I'm pulling up that right now, Commissioner Steinman.
We've got time. We can pull this up.
If you want to talk about the staggering,
I think it's just going to be very easily to breach that
Yeah.
ordinance.
Yeah,
Just because if there's 12 cars at any given time, it's just going to be a lot of complaints for you guys as far as
Sure.
this is not in compliance, so.
yeah, we would expect it, whatever is agreed upon or put as a condition, we would expect it to be like very clearly communicated to the clientele that this is your pickup window, this is.
Or however they can accommodate to only having 2 cars there at a time.
Sure.
I think one or the other needs to happen.
Yeah, and you make a condition, you know, however the commission sees fit, if you do, but
Oh,
do you
Ian,
need
I'm
me
gonna
to,
kick you out for a second. That's all
you're
right.
gonna kick me out?
No, Ian is slides.
Oh, okay.
sounds
Okay, this is the narrative from,
Yeah.
not out of the meeting. You can
I
stay.
remember this,
one.
yeah,
you were
yeah.
there.
I was gonna.
So this is how this one was proposed. Each parent is given a 15-minute window to pick up and drop off their child. Then they line up on the right side of the road. If a line of cars happen, they need to line up and wait their turn to be in front of and drop off and pick up their child. Can't block driveways. They exit from the basically from the curb side of the road, so they're not crossing a street. If they miss their window, they need to park and come in and get their child.
The 15-minute window could be relevant, but depending on how many cars there are, you could also look at doing it as a just not more than this many cars at a certain time.
this one was this was a date for preschool.
It's a preschool and it was.
So they had different sessions.
Yeah, they had
It's
a
a little
morning,
different,
an
but-
AM and a PM. And it was, yeah, kind of a different configuration with the street too, but
It was a circle.
it was a cul-de-sac, yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a safety issue. If you have people dropping off on the street and in the driveway,
Sure,
because those people in the driveway have to back out. Right into those who are dropping off on the street.
sure. Good things to consider too. This was the kind of the flow of the last one that came to us, but each one is going to be a unique situation where what worked perfectly on the last one is maybe not. So it's good to consider for this one specifically, what impacts are we considering, what appropriate conditions would there be? And
I have some anxiety about kids getting out of a car and running to the building.
I think we need to have it be that they're escorted in by an employee, and yeah, not running.
But
Yeah, that.
it could be by staff or a
That could be
parent.
another condition you look at, kind of separate from like the traffic impact,
Yeah,
but
I'm less
just,
concerned about the traffic and just want to make sure the kids are safe.
I think looking for, we always say
No,
health, safety and welfare. is important. So that could be another condition the commission considers. Any other questions from you guys?
I think so.
Hey,
Okay, so you want to talk?
Sure.
Chair, okay.
So my term is up.
Yeah, Commissioner
No.
Allen has served 2 full complete terms consecutively, which is the maximum allowed in consecutive order by the city ordinance. So he needs to take 3 years off and he can
get out of here.
How long-
Take a sabbatical.
How long is that? The term?
6 years.
Each term is 3 years. Yep,
Unless you're starting in some funky.
You can,
Right, yeah.
We'll talk about it.
correct.
you can take a 3-year sabbatical and then you can come back.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. What we calling it. So that is for the gravel pit. The term is up, I believe, in June. So the commission will need to hold probably we could do it in April and we can do it in May. A vote to elect a new chair, and usually at that time, we just do new elections for chair and vice chair. So do you have a preference? I guess this is a commission question on you want to, be chair right up until the last meeting and switch over. We can schedule it sooner. We did read in the ordinance that technically a vote on chair is supposed to happen every single year. So wherever we do it, we'll just plan to keep doing it that month every year from here on out. So we can do it at the next meeting. We can do it in May. We just have to get it done before your term is up in June.
You guys have to.
So
You have to make a motion or something?
not right now. I'm just getting feedback for when we put it on the agenda. If it would be helpful to have the new chair here while you're still here, just in case there are, procedural questions or anything. I think everyone would be.
guys are
So if we
qualified.
did it in May, so then it'd be the May meeting and the June meeting, and then July, the new chair.
Chair would
Yeah.
start, and then
You could do it like that too, yeah.
and then probably a year from May, we'd elect a new chair.
We just plan to do it in May. Does that sound?
Well,
okay?
we do have 2 meetings in April,
Yeah, and
right? I mean, so we
You're
we have that extra. Let's do it in May.
We can do it in May if that's fine. That works. Okay. Any other questions on this?
That's my thought.
there's also not very specific wording on how to do that election, so we might want to think about just doing like an agenda item.
Okay.
And think through that, because it can always be a little uncomfortable, where it's like, well, who's gonna. Am I just gonna get like nominated out of
Don't make
nowhere?
eye contact with anybody yet.
Yeah, so we can try to think through and maybe look at how we've done it on other boards and commissions. But-
Yeah, and just make sure that it's if we have the election in May or whatever else, that there's wording that it doesn't go into effect. That meeting, it goes into effect trailing.
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
definitely do that.
Okay, we'll plan on that then.
Okay, thanks. Any other items to discuss? Do we have a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Hey, all in favor?
Aye.
Right,
Meeting's adjourned.
thanks.
Hey, you made your first motion.
All right.
Way to go.
We're gonna start the next one in 20 minutes, right?
Yeah, I'm happy to watch.
What was that, Commissioner Ebler?
Are we gonna start the next one in 20 minutes?
We'll
Yeah,
start at
6 o'clock.
6. Yep.
Yeah.
So, and it'll
Okay.
be that separate Zoom link. So if you need it resent, just send me an email.
I have it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.